So 22 days until the haute route. That's until the haute route, not until I have a stab at Alpe d'Huez. But 22 days, a smidge over 3 weeks. I'm going to break down for you now, roughly speaking, where my thought process is at with regards to training, preparation, all that good stuff. I'm going to try and keep it brief, try and keep it like quick and to the point. If there's anything you want me to go into detail about, leave a comment down below. I'll go into a bit of detail down there. I'm even on brand today with my haute route cap, but I feel like my jacket is clashing with the colours here. Okay, I know you can't really see what I can see behind me here on the whiteboard, but I'm going to do my best to talk you through what's on here. So, much like the build-up to the Mallorca 312 event and, well, the Cyclist KOM, although Cyclist KOM, a little bit different. Like, we're talking about double the effort. Like, Cyclist 25 minutes, we're talking, okay, not quite double for Alpe d'Huez, but like at least a fair bit longer. And the Mallorca 312 was obviously like a pretty much an endurance feat, like over 9 hours of riding, as opposed to, well, the haute route being 3 days, with possibly 5 hours worth of riding maximum on those days. And then the Marmotte the weekend after, which would also be, you know, probably 6 hours around that mark. So let's get into some of my thought process. Okay, so I've broken it down into demand, sessions, and then fueling. You'll have to forgive me, like until I get like a better place to do this sort of stuff in the future, then we're just gonna have to put up with this cramped space. Okay, so for the sake of the length of the video, I'm going to whiz through what's on here and try and give you a summary of why I've put it up on the board. I'm bearing in mind, like, I'm working with a very small space here. Yes, I do have quite a large whiteboard, but I'm only using a tiny area of it. So the demands, we have the weather, right? A lot of people have told me it's obviously like likely to be hot. It's obviously going to be at altitude a little bit. So to prepare for those two things, well, there's only so much I could do in terms of altitude. I live at sea level, pretty much. The thing with the heat is I'm going to ride indoors, supplementing with very short sessions, maybe 3-4 times a week, possibly. We'll see how we get on over the next 3 weeks. I just ride an hour at zone 2 indoors with no fans, and hopefully the temperature in this room will get like upwards of mid-20 degrees. It's obviously not going to be the same as, you know, 30 odd degrees in the Alps. Obviously the haute route is a 3-day event. We're focusing on the haute route specifically because, well, Alpe d'Huez is the following weekend, so I can concentrate on that when the time comes. We can split it into two things. Although I have the Marmotte, to me, the Alpe d'Huez time trial is more important. So we have the haute route, which is a 3-day event. Then we have the Alpe d'Huez TT, which is the following week. So obviously a 3-day event, and then a 45 minute time trial. I've spoken about altitude, but something I do have to take into account with the event demands is the energy expenditure over like the 3 days of the haute route. But then of course recovering from that. So I need to be able to recover like pretty well afterwards, and obviously between those stages, so that I can then knock out the Alpe d'Huez TT probably 4 or 5 days after I finish the 3-day haute route. So sessions, I guess we're getting into the meat and potatoes of it now. It goes without saying I need to get used to climbing, because as many of you will know, like the difference between like producing power on the flat, producing power on the climb, there is a little bit of a difference. Now, training on climbs is great if you have climbs long enough to be able to train on. The downside to living around here is we have some great climbs, but they're not very long, and you get some really kind of slow descents, so you can't really do anything productive. So I tend to use a lot of flat roads. Flat roads are fine. It means you can stay on the power the whole time, but also you can practice things like low cadence, high torque work, which is something you may experience in the mountains, especially late on into a ride. We have lactate threshold, plus. I don't know why I put a plus there at the end of it, but like what I mean by lactate threshold is basically I need to be better at producing it and then getting rid of it. It's as simple as that. It doesn't necessarily mean my lactate threshold has to be higher. It doesn't necessarily mean my FTP has to be higher. However, my ability to work at it, close to it, for a long period of time does matter. And, you know, repeated effort as well. You'd have seen like my most recent session potentially, big 40-minute blocks at sweet spot, give or take, with surges in power, and then straight into 2 by 20 minutes at just below FTP. So something a little bit less, I guess, talked about is how do I practice. This sort of comes under the fueling as well, but like the laps for water. So what I intend to do is getting used to, again, because I've got out of the habit of fueling and hydrating frequently. So if the temperature is going to be, you know, upwards of 30 degrees plus, I obviously need to keep hydrated. But also I want to get some calories in, some carbohydrates. So by doing 2 in 1, by having both in liquid form, I need to get used to doing that. So what I'm planning on doing is either doing laps of like calling by here and refilling with water and carbohydrate when I do a 4 or 5 hour session, so that I'm not sort of just going out and doing one big loop on 2 bottles. Like I need to get used to doing, you know, a bottle an hour, a bottle of carbs an hour. Or I might drive to a location to do, you know, a specific session on a specific route that I know has great climbs on it, longer climbs, things like that. You know, don't be afraid to travel somewhere to do a better session. That's something I learned when I was racing and like trying to mimic demands of events. I wouldn't be afraid of traveling somewhere to get that better terrain, I guess, that would suit the session. So my workout split of the week is probably going to be my main days. I'm going to call them main days rather than like training days. It's going to be Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays. These will be the days when I focus the most. So we're going to focus the most on Tuesday's session, which is going to increase every week for the next 3 weeks, both time in zone around and just below like threshold power, increasing my ability to do more and more, of course. But then also I can practice the fueling on that day because I'm doing multiple hours as well. Thursday is going to be time trial day. So Thursday evening. That's not to say I'm not going to train these other days. I'm just saying the days I'm going to focus the most on. You'll find sometimes that it's really good to have this sort of structure. So you can focus more on what matters. So Thursday time trial day, this is where I'm going to practice pacing. So I'm going to practice sort of nutrition, obviously leading up to a time trial effort. And I'm also going to practice power output for Alpe d'Huez. The only snag being that, you know, I'm not at altitude, I'm at sea level, and I won't have necessarily the temperature either. So, you know, those things we can't really control. And at the end of the day, I want to create session quality. So if I wanted to actually do, you know, a flat out time trial indoors on Zwift, for example, in, you know, 25-degree room, it's really enclosed, I could do that, but I might be sacrificing session quality, and I might not actually recover from it as quickly as if I was to do it outdoors. You've got to remember recovery is important when you're training for something. So the Saturday session, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do on that yet. It might be a bit of a kitchen sink workout, a little bit of mix of everything. I don't want to keep it too structured because I know that like the bulk of my work is going to be done on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And, you know, back-to-back days is something that will match the demand of the 3-day event. Well, technically it's 2-day because the last day is the time trial of Alpe d'Huez. So, you know, you just got to dig deep for 40 minutes, 45 minutes, if you can. The other thing as well is Full Gas, which is an online training platform. They have, shout out to Stephen Brophy for messaging me and telling me about this recently. They have a way of you now riding with visuals as well, as if you're actually riding up Alpe d'Huez. So I'm going to use that. I know Zwift have Alpe d'Huez. But in terms of visuals, I'm going to use that footage and I'm going to ride indoors. So I will combine that with the 1 hour zone 2, heat adaptation sessions. So I know time's getting on and I said I would keep this short and quick. So we're going to zap over the fueling, which is something I've been doing for years. And I encourage all of you to experiment and try and find what works for you, because fueling is something that is incredibly sort of personal. It's almost something that you can't, I mean, you can give like plans for and stuff, but there's some things that work, such as, like carbohydrates, how much to eat, when, and like, before, during, after, all that sort of stuff. But in terms of like body composition and everything else, and everyone trying to like get to their best like performing weight and all this sort of stuff, it really sort of it's such a can of worms that I would rather you sort of take away what you want to and make of that what you will. So for me, fuel, carbs, hydration, these are important things, obviously. And then I'm gonna have like high and low days. So just how I prepared for Mallorca, it's something that I don't do year round. It's only something that I dip in and out of, which creates peak fitness and form and peak body composition, is like that 3 to 4 weeks before the event. I change things, small changes, just to make sure that I get to the place I want to be. So things that I make sure I'm hitting: carbohydrates. Even though technically I eat loads, it's worth me just tracking to make sure I am getting loads. Fat, if left uncontrolled and unmeasured, I do tend to eat probably upwards of like 100 grams of fat a day, which again is no problem. But when I'm trying to get into shape for one specific event, one specific goal, I try to manage and manipulate certain things. So fat I keep to a what we call like a necessity. Like that is the bare minimum I would need potentially. I could probably go lower, but the things I like to eat, sometimes I'll fat them. So I'm not going to deprive myself fully. And then protein, 160 grams. I'm aiming for on my hard training days, but also on my low days. On like my, my other days basically. 160 grams. Same as fat, but carbohydrates drop down to 300 grams, so about half. So you can usually work this out by your grams per kilo of body weight. So for me, 600 grams is 10 grams per kilogram of body weight. And then obviously it's 5 grams per kilogram of body weight for my lesser training days, of which I will literally only be riding like 2 hours steady endurance, or taking a day off, because I'm really going to focus on these 3 days of the week. So like I said, that is like the prep for Mallorca. It's like the prep in terms of metabolic flexibility and changing things so that my body is not just relying constantly on a ton of carbohydrate. I can sort of peak and trough with it as I wish, basically. So that is the overview. I've tried to keep it as simple as possible. I don't try to overload you and bombard you with information. But if you found it useful, insightful, please give me a thumbs up. Please comment down below if there's any questions you have. If you're doing the whole route, I made this video because it's obviously interesting to see what I'm thinking about ahead of the event. But I think more importantly, I make it because I know there's people out there who maybe don't know where to start, and this could be a starting point to just get some thoughts and the ball rolling. It doesn't have to be a haute route. It could be an actual 3-day race in the UK. Okay, it won't be at altitude, but at least it gives you a little bit of groundwork to break down the demands, because you need to know where you're going and what it's going to take to get there. So that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.